هل قربنا يكون عندنا قواعد بيانات ومسح رقمي شامل للاعداد والقطاعات ولا لا؟ ده الاربع تحديات، والتحدي الخامس الحقيقه ان انا انجح في اداره هذه الملفات الاربعه في اقل وقت ممكن. برحب بضيوفي الكرام على المنصه. برحب بمعالي الوزير طارق الملا، وزير البترول والثروه المعدنيه. اهلا بحضرتك. اهلا بحضرتك. اهلا وسهلا. ارحب كذلك بايضا المتحدثين في قطاع البترول، المهندس احمد
persons of petroleum sector engineer Mohammed Osama, as well as Miss Engineer Yusra Asakir. Both are members of the unit of to support and modernization of the petroleum sector. So the first pivotal is the increased population, as well as Dr. Halam. Good evening. I'd like to welcome His Excellency Mr. General, the President of the Statistics Department, and I would like to welcome Minister of Agriculture, Ms. Mai Said, from the presidential initiative of rehabilitation of the youth. I'd like to welcome His Excellency Mr. Al-Qadi, the Minister of IT, and I would like to welcome the youth from the presidential initiative. The first pivotal, as well as the question to His Excellency Mr. Engineer Tariq Al-Molla, the Minister of Petroleum. It's a big sector of old history, yet the volume of challenges aren't that small. I would like to brief us the most important challenges in order to take its normal presence according to its long history. In the name of Allah, it's very important introductory. It's in a very old sector. It's hard to start that the power sectors of two parts, fuels and electricity, are the wheels of development in each country. And if you would like to talk about the importance of petroleum sector, it's important to talk about the importance of production. The citizens who take the only witness to the last product, whether it is the fuel of the households or factories or the gas stations, never witnessed what's behind these products of the final product. And I would like just to say that we were praised by the Almighty God of such revolutions, and it's up to you to realize its use, its production, as well as the process of the adoption. If we start to say that our responsibility is just to provide the needs of the local market of the petroleum products of all forms, so we may say it is enough. No. Currently, the local production, so we cannot just equal the consumption. So we only say that the consumption is 35%. We use 80 million tons, 35%. We may say that 40% of petroleum products and 40 million tons of gas. What we use above or plus 27 million ton of 800 million US dollar of current prices, taken into consideration that the print prices are increasing. So I've already entered the first challenge, that our local product cannot fulfill the consumption. Secondly, that I'm subject and vulnerable vis-a-vis the international market, so and that our consumption to be increased. The diversity of resources to take such or to make such deficits would be part of the problem. Yes, I should work on two pivots to increase the local products. And we all know that this industry is indeed a universal industry. I'd like to excuse us for 1 minute. The entrance of His Excellency, Mr. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the President of the Republic. Please be seated. I'd like to welcome you, Your Excellency, Mr. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. We would like to welcome you again. So we talk quickly that it is a session of the challenges of petroleum, the population, and the lack of the data, of the information, as well as the data for the citizens. And we are talking about the most challenges for the petroleum sectors. Briefly, imported 35% of our use would represent $800 million a month, which is the first challenge. And we are working speedily on that basis to try to increase the production to minimize the gap of what we use locally, as well as our need of US dollar, foreign currency, and importation. So, in fact, we may talk in details just to take bullets of the second pivot of the challenge, which is when you talk about these products, as we've already fulfilled the local product, whether from the local production or the importations. I give figures to say to the people and the youth and the young people that we've already sold last year about 185 billion Egyptian pounds. This is the cost of what we sold. Yet we have subsidies of such price of 100 billion, which is the difference of 55 billion Egyptian pound, which is the subsidies that the states would bear the difference of the cost of 55 billion Egyptian pound, which represent 35% of our subsidies in such a product. Such figures are counted on the budget of 2016 at the lifting price of Brent. If we already talked about $35, and these figures are subject to foreign increases. The 55 billion Egyptian pound would be 65 till 80 at the last first quarter of the year. So already mentioning the numbers and figures, I know that the Ministry of Petroleum has, you may correct me, of 100 billion Egyptian pounds for the governmental institutions. We may see that a part of it is related to the subsidies, the large amount for the Ministry of Electricity, which is the bigger consumer of power, that is using 42% of our production, around 42% of different forms, natural gas or solar or mazut. If you mentioned the figures, we say most of them for the Ministry of Electricity, because the Ministry of Electricity are bearing burdens because their productions are not sold. Therefore, they cannot made the expansion and result in accumulations, which is a mechanism of network of mechanisms. Your Excellency, Engineer Tariq, why you are simplifying the issue? I say it frankly, no, you are simplifying the issue. If I see the Ministry of Electricity, its amount, as a state, we give subsidies and we are ready to bear its repercussions. But the lack of collecting the value of the right service of the ministry, therefore, it is a huge number you have, isn't it? People should be aware, because you know today that as a citizen, if I did not pay this, the power I used, this from the subsidy would be over billions. Egyptians did not pay you, so and you borrow, you get loans from the banks, and you bear the interest, and it's regardless of the deficit. So if you please, when you talk before the people, you say in its volume and its repercussions, and otherwise you don't come and complain and say you don't have enough money. Is it affected the modernizations of the infrastructure, so whether it is related to the information or the survey means, or the tools that will enable me as a worker in the Ministry of Petroleum to produce the best? All these would impact you? Yes, certainly. Initially, if you say that the number that accumulated that would lead to have debts in to complete our expenditure, so I also would bear our partner the more burden, which is the foreign partner that they are assisting me in the exploration of the petroleum, to make them start to slow the process of the investment of development of the fields that would enter us in a vicious circle. So I would also affect me the local productions that would make me to do more exportations, have pressure on the foreign banks as well as the central banks to get the US currency that would burden and have obstacles before the economy and would not given the good services for the citizens. If we today talk about the subsidy of petroleum of 55 billion Egyptian pound, and it's subject for an increase, if we say no matter how talk shows or programs for the rationalizations of using electricity, I think it's not enough. So the result, the more the citizens that isn't entitled for subsidy to use more, the more subsidy of use. If we talk about the gas card, I made it myself. Till now, we had no card for using gas. This is one of the means that we are trying to affect. It's an effort of several ministries and entities, and we laid out a plan. Soon we'll announce the launching of such a system, and we're already on the track of the second phase. But some vehicles, such as the tuk-tuk and the agricultural vehicles, are not included, but we may say that today we may just like put aside a part, otherwise we'd neglect the whole system. Allow me, sir, just to move on to the youth of the Ministry of the Petroleum. I would actually get into that point. As we talked about the challenges, so we've already mentioned just briefly the issue of subsidies and the rationalization of consumption. I would like just to say last point before introducing the use, which is the intensity of the use in power, which is a universal index that we talk about. How did measure of each thermal unit to be used to produce $1 for the national or the local production. So we'd use like 26 thermal units to have only $1 for the local production. If we compare ourselves to Britain, only use 4,000 million thermal units to gain $1. We only use 76. If we talk about other countries, the more rich countries in petroleum, such as UAE, that are using 17,000 units. So we are that, which means that we are 50% more in consumption of power, which means that we don't have efficiency in consumptions that would lead to losses in the systems. Are we getting solutions? Amongst the solutions with the more production and improving the efficiency, we are talking about the improving the performance efficiency that led us to talk about the project of supporting the modernization of petroleum sector, that our future use would have more details. On that, we're moving to the members of such a project. You have only 5 minutes each. The outset, allow me on behalf of my colleagues to extend my thanks for the organizers. It's a great honor to be amongst you and between our president in the light of the universal challenges that impacted several sectors in the state, which amongst of this, the Ministry of Petroleum that contribute in our Egyptian economy, and we are believed that to be part of the solution. We've decided to be part of the solution to overcome such challenges. Yet we still have a new way of thinking to have a future and hope in tomorrow that started in a dream, based on the idea how to see the petroleum sector of our state in the future, in the meantime, how to manage in a very economic way in fulfilling the needs of development, as well as the maximizing the use of petroleum as main resources of the state. As the president said, to have an idea to be a bridge of crossing the challenges that started on 2 phases. The first phase to have a very diagnostic study composed of a team, included the expertise of the sector, and already used one of the biggest consultative offices, and we made workshops with the partners and the companies who've laid and determined the shortcomings and the postcomings and determine the risks. At the end of the first phase that lasted only for 3 months, we've already achieved the 3 main parts. Firstly, formulating a well-agreed formula of the optimization of the sector. The sector determine the natural resources to transform Egypt as a regional officer of exchange of petroleum and gas, and in order to make the petroleum sector as a model or a pilot. Thirdly, to determine the goals, or rather the features of the real development within only 3 years, as a challenge. In the meantime, the project would include speedy gains and goals in order to have practical results within only 6 months. In order to achieve the Egypt strategy of the sustainable development he launched by His Excellency Mr. President in Sharm el-Sheikh, we used such a strategy to lay out the programs in order to enable us to achieve such a project of specific goals, in order to have a very applicable project. Hence, we started the second phase of the project, which is to execute the different programs spoken by my colleagues of Mr. Ahmed that would cover all the features of the sector. The first program would target the attraction investment through the improvement of the means of the current agreements to be or to have them vis-a-vis the other applicable agreements all over the world. The second program is to develop the structure of the sector and to imply the good governance. The third program would focus on developing the human resources and raising potentials of the workers. In the meantime, we should discover the good potentials. The fourth and fifth program would focus on developing the technical side of this industry, i.e. all the phase of the production, since starting from the fields till the last products, that aiming to increase the production and rationalize the use of using power. Excuse us, how would we rise the program? The first phase was funded already from where? From the International Bank. The second phase, we are targeting the provision of fundraising currently through several organizations, funds that take concern in financing such products that were targeting the comprehensive development in a very specific program, in a very specific timetable. Yes, exactly. We've targeted the structure of the sector, the human, the labor work, and the technical aspects, aiming to increase its profits. The third program would crystallize such a development to transform Egypt ultimately to regional center of information in order to optimize our geographical destination and lines for transportation and distributions that would enhance the regional role of Egypt. Aside of all mentioned, would tackle another pivot to establish a very comprehensive resources program, which is very important for the mechanism of decision making and a crisis management in the meantime. I'd like to thank you, NG Yusra, and sorry for the interruption. We move into the second file or second challenge, which is the increase of population. In fact, in order to update my data, we are increasing 1 million within less than 6 months and 8 doubles of the rate of population in South Korea, and the fifth duplications of increase in China. Is it, are these statistics would represent the volume of the problem in reality? Yes. It's very important to cast light. I wish I had in Sharm el-Sheikh conference, which is the public calculations of populations of 2017. It's an a project that we should make it in every 3 years instead of just every 10 years. Despite the development of IT, yet they are making the statistics in every 10 years. It is important we are to get the specifications of the populations, their buildings, its connections of empty apartments, new and old rental laws, and beside the establishments or the facilities, which is the economic activities throughout the state, that would provide databases for people and the buildings that are linked to our problems. What I am presenting before you, this statistics, for the first time, and we are very old in the statistics that was made 1880, and the first statistics that we dreamed of to be electronics through the tablets, machines, and 45 users to send for one single data center, and of course all those who are related to IT know how big the work is, and in addition to the control of all the people who are working in site, and to extract all the data within 7 weeks, we are heading 18 months of the whole statistics for the state that is available to enter our data electronically. Each one would have access on the internet. That would save our effort and the cost to send the guy to take these statistics. All has mechanisms would be announced in time, and the counts for all things to be at the end of April and May, and we hope that the support of His Excellency Mr. President and the cabinet, as well as the people, to support the workers on the body to provide all the required data. With respect to the issue of the population, in fact, the last session was on the economic challenge, which is we all touch. Secondly, we've had a moment of silence for the martyrs of the police, and the second or the following challenge to confront the terrorism. But the populations, the people do not actually feel in it, and they're all aware of the other challenges, yet do not actually know the volume of the population increase. That it has a different dimension economically, God willing, is based on the potentials of the economy would enable us to overcome. In terrorism, our determinations in confronting to would overcome. Yet the populations that would last for 80 years, that require services based on the health and development. If we say that the expected age is 73 for women and nearly 80 for the male. But before we enter the issue, we should say that the populations is the most important resource for us. But when we get a biggest number, would add to the potentials of the states. When the states would have potentials to provide them good health services, create opportunities when they finish their schooling, and they get houses when they start to think about getting married. Timely, the population policy is dynamic, not a fixed one. Other countries would determine its potentials according to their resources. So we should come out of such project that the people should need, that the population is a burden for the state, which is actually interest to the dilemma, whether they are good or bad. We do not have such luxuries. We are forced to lock out the easy one, which is the population, through awareness, as said by Mr. Amr, that we are growing by 2.4 million within less than 6 months. The population growth is escalating, and we only and also as well as the deterioration of the resources. So the number of births is was increased until 2015 for the first time. Till 2014, we've already we were minimized for about 30,000, which is positive, yet it is not actually a big thing. These were the rates. It is what I concern about is the line with yellow, or rather the blue one. We had from 2000 to 2005 the population growth deteriorating, decreased, starting since till 2014 of a constant increase, and thanks to the efforts of the Ministry of Populations, in fact, we did not continue the increase, yet the rate decreased. Today, at the first 9 months, we are witnessing a decrease of the first 9 months to have 75, and yet it is not the number we wish to have. Would make the balance in the population. Yes, we still need for, and we are having governor rates of increase more the average, and it's important to cast the light of the governor rates of the Upper Egypt. In the middle, it is very clear, because I am sorry, because of the increase in population is linked constantly and innocently with poverty. The more your Excellency, Mr. General Abu Bakr, I'm terribly sorry because your time is up. Yet it's very important, and I was actually longing for someone to talk about such an issue. So please, I'm terribly sorry, Mr. President. Yet this issue is very important, and we are in dire need to let the people be aware of. Thank you. At this the biggest centers of the biggest populations, and the rate, as we say, we've already sent for all governors two things: either they have the biggest number or the highest rates. That we have for the numbers 24,000 in a center for a year that were born. The second slide for the rate, we say it's 2.4, but in other centers and districts that reached 15%, a rate of population growth. rate, and of course that would burden our economy process. The last or the following slide. Your Excellency, in 1950, the birth of Egypt was equal to Italy. But in the 90s, we were actually having all the populations of Italy as well as France. In fact, Your Excellency, I've borrowed such a slide from Mr. Magid Osman personally. In 2000, we were of birth of Italy, in France as well, and Spain. In 2012, yet the more to come. And of course, they have their own resources. And the last or the following slide, we brought the experiment of China and their positive incentives they made at the earlier of the 70s. They made the policy of the one child, and they had, of course, negative incentives in that time. But the second child policy, all the incentives they took, they can gain from them. At the third children, they followed all these negative measurements. And the following slides, in Iran, similar to our demographic features, during the Iraqi-Iranian war, they were calling or advocating for the increase of population. So, yet Khomeini actually was advocating for the birth control, which is an example for the population policy that is based on dynamics and not a solid one. In 1992, they made a law based on the last, or rather the length period of births to avoid the distance or the length between the births to be within 3 to 5 years. And I said, it is said in the Holy Quran that the mother to feed their babies for 2 years. And if someone taking the birth from the brother or sister to be a call would touch a part. In fact, I would like to thank you for having me this opportunity, which is the biggest, to tackle the biggest challenge that Egypt is facing, the increase of population, to go out of the hole that it is the biggest problem currently, and it is a praise in the meantime, and hopefully to have a better situation later on. Dr. Yusuf, what about solutions? Our births are equal to Britain, France, and Italy, as well as Sweden. What about the solution? So please, rather than the solution mentioned by Iran in the Iraqi-Iran war, I'd like to thank his Major General Abu Bakr al-Gindi that made me to enter straight away to tackle the challenges that would enable us to work on such issues. Before I start, there is something. The populations are composed of men, elderly, young children, and girls. The elderly is in a separate challenge, that cannot be ignored. Yet the biggest challenge, based on our numbers, that each couple would produce children. There is a base of having more children. The challenge is just to decrease the number of births. I do not say how to calculate it, but just to imagine that I have each year 4 million women that are able to give birth. That cannot be worked on without the services of birth control. That composed of 2 things, the awareness and in the meantime the services of birth control to be in place of above the level. Such services were deteriorated, yes. We were all relied on the programs of the birth control that are funded from abroad. Now we don't have such funding, and we have financial challenges that is tolerable. We may say the means of birth control, the cheapest one that we can bring to Egypt that is applicable to the Egyptian society. It's not about the means of birth control to be provided in the government. It is freely for each one to go to the private sector, to the pharmacy shops to buy the birth control pills, and that is are provided everywhere, not just within the government, but the most important thing is relied on the physician and the nurse and their services or their type of services. The nurses aren't that enough vis-à-vis the populations. These challenges should have before us, and we have examples of developed countries that would let the nurse to provide birth control, not necessarily for a doctor to do so. A trained or practiced nurse is able to provide. It is the nurse from the not just the one that supports, which is her study on social study, but the nursing sector. In instance, in Alexandria, the birth rate is 2, because all the nurses and health units in Alexandria are graduated from the high nursing institute. In Spain, are relied on nurses. Doctors would ask the nurse how to deal with such a woman, so the idea of nurses. Secondly, I may get use the medical supervisor in the health unit. I could borrow them to assist me. Importantly is the female nurses. If we are talking about a means for birth control, is to use the female nurses. Second, she sees the missed opportunities. Women during pregnancy are fatigued, so I should talk about the lengths of getting birth or giving birth, and the second missing opportunities straight after delivery, that they are in need for someone to talk about the birth control. Who would be responsible of crystallizing such ideas? Of course, the Ministry of Health as well as the Ministry of Population. So the collaboration between the two ministries, it is very important to just add to our shortages. The last one, lastly, we've only got 1 minute left. With respect to the media campaign, it's very important to be talking, while talking about awareness, how would it create a general environment? If I get a lady in Al Bahira governance, I used to give birth for 5 children, so that they cannot. This is not enough. We should also have a personal communication through home visits. Secondly, the age segmentations, we are having an increase of giving birth for the lower ages because they are lacking the awareness of birth control. Of course, the percentage or the need of such awareness is high, yet is not fulfilled. The increase of between 2008 and 2014 are high vis-à-vis the other segmentations. Also, I'd like to tackle the point of the economic development for the women. While they are working, the more they work, the less they can give birth. Of course, it is in the or on the contrary, the opposite is happening. No. With respect to the women, have women in the market, in the labor market, that they should be aware that they are a part of assisting their husband. Both of them, they should assist each other in order to decide to have small children. To conclude, just give me one point, last one point, the early marriage. Educating the girls are priorities for the future and for the present. So we should focus on educating the girls. And that I require from the Ministry of the Social Solidarity through their programs of dignity and takaful to have the concept of the small family. I mentioned the personal communications and the decentralization of managing the housing program, as well as the coordination, the follow-up and the assessment. And the central body has a very good database that we can use. I want also to add that all these efforts go in parallel, not just like the economic reform that I could just take it and make it through steps. This should be done by the other entities. And the other thing, they should focus on to have the education. So we are talking about the demographic gift. A good percentage of the youth capable of production are capable of increasing the economic growth. In the meantime, their efficiency aren't equal. I cannot just wait to receive another segment of youth that aren't capable. Today, each child that is born should have a good education. The last thing that I need to say, I'd like to thank His Excellency Mr. President for his concern on population, but I hope that the human resources is the basis of the economic growth. And the second point, that the institutional structure of the National Council of Population or the Ministry of Population, whatever the structure is, that should. But I decided to be a rapporteur of the National Council, of the Council, as well as the Ministry. I was totally free Unable to do a national strategy. I'm terribly sorry. To conclude, we should have an institutional cooperation, and that should be very clear. And I thank you, and I'm very sorry for the time constraint. The third pivot is the agriculture. So I'll give the floor to the Minister of Agriculture and Agricultural Reform. You've only, sir, have 5 minutes left. It's only me who represented the agricultural sector, yet other sectors have more than one representative. So please give me more time. In the name of Allah, Your Excellency, Mr. President Abdel Fattah Sisi, your ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to name the misuse of agricultural lands is a crime. Allow me just to name it as it is a crime. So can you just play on the presentation, which is a misuse of the upcoming generations' rights of the land? The reasons of such a problem and the mechanism of solutions. Firstly, wrong beliefs for the Egyptian farmer to stay, him and his family, as well as their animals, I'm sorry for using such a term, to live in one place. Such a confrontation required more efforts from all the entities of the state in confronting such an issue, as well as the role of media, religious institutions, and educational institutions, adding to you and the youth, the civil societies, of the rule of awareness and to change such a belief. The second reason, which is the population increase, the increase of population that does not has in return a development of the Egyptian village. The solution should be briefed to have the state to adopt a national program to develop the Egyptian village. People are used to build their houses as well as their children to have such a horizontal expansion. So instead, we could just have a vertical expansion. It is possible to have a new plan for a new villages in a governorate that has a desert backup, provided that these locations is to be in touch of the agricultural sphere, that of full facilities to be alike of the project of building your home. The third solution and mechanism that is called or advocated by His Excellency, Mr. President, to have such an expansion of 4 million agricultural lands, to start with only 1.5, that include agricultural investments, also to transform the people or move the people for a new society. So that would lead me to remember, we've already had a visit in El Frafra area and visited a model that established for housing, and the president asked a farmer that you ask a farmer, can you just move your home in Delta and come to live here? Based on all the belief, the farmer said, no, I can move, but just for work and live in my area. So the role of Ministry of Agriculture to confront such phenomena, firstly, to implement the organizing legislations that include the Egyptian constitutions of 29 articles, the law of agriculture number 53 of 1966, modified for 116 of 83, and the unified building law of 2008. The second role of Ministry of Agriculture, the issue the ministerial decrees that recognizing the measurements of allocations based on the law of agriculture and its modifications, as well as the unified law for building that concern the lands would serve all the animal products and animal resources. In fact, there are two decrees. These projects that the government is entitled to organize, whether they are services of building sanitation stations and decreasing the pressure of natural gas, as well as new bills of exploration of oil. Also, we determine stations of selecting the fruits of serving and storing the fruits and vegetables. The third role of Ministry of Agriculture in confronting such a challenge and stopping the misuse of agricultural lands through the agriculture bodies to report the fines and to report it to the local units and in return to be submitted to the governor, and providing the required solution support for the equipment. How many cases you've already received in 2016? So I'm going through the slide of the table, please. No, the following one, please. In 2011, the percentage of evacuation was 90%. In 2015, reached 56%. In 2016, they reached 54%. In fact, there are some obstacles with only less than minutes left. With respect to the special or the specific legislations that require modifications, among the solutions, and the fine is not just a felony, we should consider it as a crime. So legislative modifications is required to criminalize the actors, so should have the penalty of imprisonment. So we should have the Ministry of Agriculture, the authority of criminalizing the actions, as well as the director of the directorates. The last request, the last thing you would say to stop making facilities for the unlawful buildings. As a farmer visiting Al Sharqiya governorates, what I see that would made me cry in watching and seeing some valleys that cannot be owned by their farmer. So you may say that the hand of the state is just in tight in confronting such an issue. I'd like to thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. Engineer Zanfai, the Minister of Agriculture. Mrs. Umayma, within only 2 minutes, having said the minister recommendations as said by His Excellency of the rate through, we would have the lands of in the valley in the delta within 128 years. As based on the committee formed by His Excellency, the Mr. President, that issued resolutions that abide by all the entities of the state, this should be made within the ministry, its mission with the collaborations of the Directorate, Ministry of Interior to implement such misuse to have immediate action or special police compared to the Nile police and such. Also, the cooperational societies, we have thousands that should have some sort of a price to the agricultural products. Hence, the farmer would be aware that he would get a profit better than building a house, for instance, on the agricultural land. The role of the agricultural guide that has already been missing, is it from us or from His Excellency? No, I recommend that is supposedly to pay more attention to the part of the agricultural guidance in the rural development. His Excellency said that we should give him some sort of soft loans of getting houses. I say, if you are taking part of the land, we should warn them by you're not going to have any kind of housing. The issue is not just of not having the penalty based on a crime or a felony. So to be deprived of some rights, because it is the land of the food of the upcoming generation. Thank you, and I would like to apologize for the time constraint. The last pivot, the database recommended by His Excellency Mr. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. We've already have a plan to represent the state in order to develop database. Is it there in place, or we are still waiting for the data bases? Are the most important components of any state. Such attempts were on the level of ministries, entities were just in different and scattered in different entities and different ministries, and it is a national project that the President called for. We've already talked today on the issue of population, agricultural, and the petroleum products. And Mr. President mentioned how could he just to put aside the role of the human being in order just to avoid the corruption. This wouldn't be happen without without a good database that we can or we should resort to. So it is assigned, we are assigned to establish and link all the databases. The establishment of a new database that aren't in place at the level of the state. We've already started to establish about 3 months ago, and the databases need to be purified that we can resort to in building, firstly, the decision or making decision, or to enable us to build a national strategy for the state or the future planning for the state. Thirdly, the linkage of the database by the national ID to have an Egyptian citizen a number that represent the national ID for the advantages and their own databases. You mentioned about the national ID to have a CV for the citizen. There's a difference between the number of the citizens and the national ID. We've already talked about the topics that were very important, on top of which to have databases and information to enable the decision maker to take sound ones in the right manner in the right time. We've already mentioned about the social protection network. How could we determine the acquired and entitled segmentations? This cannot be happen without having a good database. Secondly, how could we determine the vulnerable segmentations that required more subsidies? It is a must for having a database to be solid, sound. His Excellency, Mr. Premier, pointed out to the databases regarding the supplies cards. Having said that, we are having 82 million citizens that are benefiting from the subsidies and of the supplies. That such a database will provide to reach 64. So how could we have or assemble all these databases to have only a unified one? We are working on that to have on 3 pivots, to have a linkage of the databases to build 2 data centers. And His Excellency, Mr. President, directed to have these centers, call it T3 or 4 of such data centers, thirdly to establish a body or an entity to be responsible in working on good governance to give the right services. Where are we? Now we are having 22 databases that, for us, we are not working solely, yet with the collaboration of different ministries in order to have databases, which is in a very sophisticated process to say how big is such volume of such a challenge that the state is trying to have a database since 2002. So how would we get a final database? We were directed by His Excellency, Mr. President Abdel Fattah Sisi, to work on the first quarter of 2017. We would have about 70%, and on the following quarter we would have a fixed databases And such information and data would qualify us to make a citizen card that gain all the services for the citizen. You've already mentioned the gas card, for instance. We are having a card for gas, for the supplies, for the bread, for the agricultural position. How could we have all these in one card to be a citizen card in order to reach a digital identity for the citizen? This would be completed within 6 months, God willing. It is a challenge. I have only one last word, if you allow me. The challenge is big, huge, yet if it is with the weak would generate a frustration. Yet a challenge with the youth and the strong would generate a will that is capable to change a challenge for a success. So we are working on that to change the challenge to a big success. So we've only got 2 minutes left. So we hope your cooperation. Following what is being said, we are hoping to have digital data and another mechanism for all data and a group of recommendations it is very important to start to talk about. Thanks, Mustafa, for the new vision to execute a complete digital panel that made us to establish an entity of great authority to write in detail the strategy of digital Egypt. So we should have a good reference for the following steps. In the meantime, to review all legislations that have obstacles of implementation. In the meantime, assign people to classify a mechanized system that is in need for a development. As a result of analysis, to have a very accurate technical and financial study. In the meantime, such paper work to get rid of the red tape and bureaucracy measurements. Adding the a group of recommendations on top of which the marketing for the citizen and the investors, as well as strategic partnership vis-a-vis some facilitations. Amongst other recommendations, the time is too tight. Excuse me for the time constraint. I would give the chance for the whole for interventions from that side. You, sir, you have the floor. Or the mic, please. Samah Sharif from Jamaica, a student of BO of IT. I convey a message for His Excellency, Mr. President Abdel Fattah Sisi. Please, we are in dire need for gaining back Jamaica Stadium. And for the Minister of Agriculture, we hope to search for a piece of land to be allocated for the youth center in Al Abadiya district. We'll give another chance for the female side intervention. Nermeen from Al Bahira. I'd like to say to you, Your Excellency, Mr. President Abdel Fattah Sisi, I'd like to thank you from the way of having such a dialogue. Secondly, and quickly, I was encouraged to participate the way of having such a dialogue. Quickly, I've already read the law of the national or civil societies. I've already read the law, and I don't work in such a society, yet I know it's an important role in society. We have 70 civil societies. Their capital is 10 billion Egyptian pound that are assisting and making charity services for the society. I hope, I wish from you, Your Excellency, Mr. President, with the coordination of the Parliament, of the House of Representatives. Yes, it is in the hands of the House of Representatives, but we are wishing from His Excellency, Mr. President, to have a review of the law. How could you say this, that I am alongside with the Parliament? How could you say this? As mentioned, it is in the hands of the House of Representatives. Have we already received the law? No, not yet. So it is in the before the Parliament that I cannot interfere in it, in fact. The last question from the middle. The lady with the red veil, peace upon you. My name is Estra Absama from Alexandria. I agree with Engineer Maha, and I recommend of the following point: the development of the agricultural land by raising the awareness of the real needs of the water in rationalizing the water. Secondly, the development of the Egyptian role, or in order to get a high productivity of high quality, so we get the economic income of agriculture better than housing. Thank you for the panelists, and I thank you for having us, and thank you. We'll have a short break of 10 minutes, and then we'll conclude our session and meeting today. Please be seated. We will have please, the young people should be seated, stay in their places just for 10 minutes break.
المؤتمر الوطني برعاية السيد الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي رئيس الجمهورية.